Welcome to Husband Talking. Explore riveting tales of infidelity with us. Please subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's begin. I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, torn between staying or just walking away. Part of me wanted to disappear and let my cheating wife wonder where I'd gone, but I needed to face her one last time. Let me backtrack a bit. My name's Jake Matthews, and I'm a CPA for an accounting firm called Benson Watts. I've been married to Sarah for almost 5 years, but that was about to change real soon. After high school, I enlisted in the Marine Corps and ended up as a dispersing clerk. My job was to make sure Marines got paid. It wasn't glamorous or exciting, but I liked working with numbers. People can lie, but numbers don't, and I appreciated that. After my stint in the Corps, I joined the reserves and finished my bachelor's degree in accounting. I started my education while I was still in the service, so it took me only 3 years to get my degree and meet the requirements for my CPA license. I met Sarah during my senior year of college. She was working to become a paralegal and had dreams of becoming a lawyer one day. We met, dated, and got married the August after graduating. I started working for Benson Watts, and she got a job at a law firm called Campbell Partners, which specialized in family law. The first 4 years of our marriage were great, or so I thought. Sarah knew I'd be gone 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year for reserve drills, and she was fine with that. Luckily, I was never sent overseas after joining the reserves, but I knew it could happen. Our life together during that time was pretty good. We loved each other and had an active sex life. We rented a nice place and even talked about buying a house and starting a family, but things started going downhill after our 4th anniversary. Sarah began going out on Fridays after work, supposedly with her girlfriends, to blow off steam. At first, she'd be home by 7:30 or 8:00 p.m., and we'd spend the rest of the night together. But as time went on, she started coming home later and later. One time, she didn't even get home until 7:00 a.m. the next day, claiming she'd crashed at a friend's place rather than risk driving home drunk. A call to her friend confirmed her story, and we went to the bar to pick up her car. Of course, her friend could have been lying to cover for her, but I had no proof. I was pissed and told Sarah to call me if it happened again so I could pick her up. "Yeah, whatever," she said, waving me off. That was the beginning of the end for us. Sarah became more dismissive, more disrespectful, telling me I had no right to question what she did outside of work or home. True, I didn't own her, but if she really loved me, wouldn't she at least let me know where she was so I wouldn't worry? I also noticed that her clothes were often disheveled when she came home from these outings, and she frequently smelled of cologne and something else. She'd rush into the shower as soon as she got home, and of course she was always too tired for sex on those nights. As a CPA, I handled all our finances and bills. Sarah and I had our checks directly deposited into our checking account, and 10 of what we made went into savings for a house. Everything was normal for the first 4 years, but then I noticed her spending habits changing. She started buying sexy lingerie from places like Victoria's Secret and some clubwear from online shops, but I never saw any of it. When I asked her about the purchases, she brushed me off, telling me to mind my own business. "I don't mind you buying nice things," I said, "but I haven't seen any of this stuff. What are you doing with it?" "None of your business," she snapped, her tone haughty. "None of my business? What the hell?" I also noticed that her salary didn't seem to increase on the 4th anniversary of her job at the firm. I asked her about it, but she claimed she didn't get a raise and that no one else did either, saying things had been slow lately. I knew that was a lie because our firm handled year-end audits for several companies, including Campbell Partners, and I knew their revenues had increased significantly over the previous year. I made a mental note to dig deeper at work. Then there was the end-of-year holiday party at her firm. I always thought of it as Christmas, but her firm called it a holiday party to be politically correct. Whatever. At first, Sarah tried to talk me out of going, which raised red flags. "You really don't like being around my coworkers, so why don't you just stay home this year?" she asked. "After all, you don't want to be around a bunch of stuffy old lawyers." "Maybe I just want to spend the evening with you," I said. She sighed and shrugged. "Well, okay, if you insist," she said. "But I'm going to spend time with my colleagues, and I can't have you hanging all over me all night." "What do you mean by spend time with your colleagues?" I asked. "Don't you see them every day at work and during your evenings out?" "Well, I might get asked to dance with some of them," she said. "Okay," I said. "You got room on your dance card for your husband?" She rolled her eyes and sighed again. "I guess I can squeeze you in somewhere," she said. "Well, don't force it," I said. We went to the party, and I hardly saw her the entire evening. She introduced me to a few of her coworkers as her pencil-pushing ball and chain, and then ran off to dance with one man after another. Her coworkers looked at me with pity, and hardly anyone spoke to me. I never got a chance to dance with her, and I noticed that she left the party more than once, returning later with some guy grabbing her butt. If I didn't know better, I could have sworn she'd slept with one or more of them. "Okay, I'm ready to go," she finally said, slurring her words. She was clearly drunk, and her clothes and makeup looked a mess. I grunted and headed to the car. She followed and tried to kiss me when she got inside, but I pushed her away, noticing something foul about her breath. "What's the matter?" she asked. "Your breath reeks," I said. "What have you been drinking?" She giggled. "Wouldn't you like to know?" she teased. "I couldn't help but notice you couldn't even give your husband a dance. But you spent the whole night with everyone else," I said. "Yeah, so what?" she asked, getting annoyed. "I also noticed you were gone a lot," I said. "Where did you go?" She laughed. "None of your business," she said. Nothing more was said on the drive home. Naturally, there was no sex that night. Sarah tried to make up for her attitude over the holidays, but I could tell things weren't the same. After the holiday season, Sarah went back to being a complete witch. Our sex life dwindled from several times a week to maybe once a week, if that. Her nights out with the girls increased, and her attitude toward me only got worse. A couple of weeks after the holiday party, I spoke to Joe Watson, the accountant who headed up the annual review of Campbell Partners. He mentioned that everyone at the firm had received a huge bonus and a significant pay increase. Sarah, for instance, had received a 30 salary bump and a 75,000 bonus, but none of that money had been deposited into our account. What the hell was she doing with it? I thought about asking her, but decided against it. With her attitude, I figured she'd only lie and use my question as an excuse to start an argument. So I asked Joe to dig a little deeper and get back to me. He agreed and asked for a couple of days. 2 days later, all hell broke loose. Joe came by my office and showed me what he'd found. The records we had from their firm indicated that Sarah had set up an account at another bank, where her salary increase was being deposited automatically. I realized she was likely planning to leave me. Joe also mentioned some irregularities in the company's books that could cause problems down the road. I made a note of the account and thanked Joe for his help. That afternoon, I received an email in my personal account. The subject line read, "What your wife is doing behind your back." Opening it, I saw a video attached. That video marked the end of my marriage. I recognized the people in it immediately. One of them was Sarah, completely naked, having sex with another man. It was bad enough seeing my wife screwing another man, but their words cut me to the bone and filled me with a rage I'd never felt before. "Oh yes, baby," the guy said. "Is this better than your dork husband?" "Way better," Sarah moaned. "He can't even get it up." "Maybe I should let you knock me up," he laughed. "Do it. I'll make your whole husband think it's his. He won't know any better. You going to keep screwing everyone else at the firm the way you've been doing for the last few months?" "Not if you get me pregnant," she said. "Come on, fill me up. I want to make my stupid husband a cuck." I stopped the video, unable to watch anymore. I looked at the email again, hoping it was some kind of sick joke. I replied with a simple message. "Who are you, and when did this happen?" A few minutes later, I got a response. "I'm Laura Williams, the wife of the guy in the video. I know your wife. This happened yesterday. Do you want to meet? If so, call me at 312-555 KEKXX. Of course, I wanted to meet. I had a million questions. How long had this been going on, for starters? The video explained a lot about what had been happening between Sarah and me over the last few months. I took down Laura's number and gave her a call. "Hello?" a woman's voice answered. "Is this Laura?" I asked. "It is," she replied. "Who's calling?" "This is Jake Matthews." "I got your email," I said. "I figured you would. Do you want to meet and talk about what's going on?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Where and when?" "How about the Starbucks around the corner from your office? In 20 minutes? She suggested. "I'll be there," I agreed, and hung up. It took me about 10 minutes to get to the Starbucks. I ordered a coffee and waited. A few minutes later, an attractive woman walked in, looked around, and came over when she spotted me. I invited her to sit down and offered to buy her a cup of coffee. After getting her order, we introduced ourselves. Laura reached into her large handbag and pulled out a manila envelope, handing it to me. "Everything you need to know is in here," she said. I opened it and found photographs, a report from a private investigator, and a flash drive. "The flash drive has more videos, photographs, and a digital copy of the report," she explained. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "How long has this been going on?" I asked, feeling my heart break. "At least 4 months, maybe longer," she said. "I know she's been with several other men at her firm. That's all in the report." "Just out of curiosity, why are you telling me all this?" I asked, confused by her motive. "Because I'm divorcing my husband, and naming your wife in the proceedings affects you," she said matter-of-factly. "Besides, I thought you should know. I figured you'd want proof." "I've suspected something for a while, but I didn't have any real proof," I admitted. "What are you planning to do?" "I already told Jeff that if I ever caught him cheating, I was filing for divorce," she said. "Like you, I suspected for a while, but didn't have solid proof until now. I caught him once before and threatened to divorce him, but he warned me that if I did, his firm would destroy me. You know their reputation, right?" "Yeah, I've heard stories," I said, thinking about some of the things Sarah had told me about her firm. "They've gotten away with some pretty shady stuff." "When is their motto?" she said. "By any means necessary." "So you're going through with it this time?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, now that I have irrefutable proof of his infidelity." I nodded in return. "So what do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "I just wanted to do the right thing. I'm not looking for revenge, if that's what you're wondering." "No offense, but why not?" I asked, somewhat surprised. "No offense taken," she said. "But until this is done, I'm not going to do anything that could screw it up. I don't want any complications." I respected her for that. "That makes sense," I said. "Thanks for the information." "You're welcome, Jake." "Again, I'm sorry you had to find out like this," she said, standing up to leave. She reached into her purse and handed me a business card. "This is my attorney's name and number. She's expecting to hear from you." I took the card and thanked her. After she left, I considered everything she'd told me. I was dying to know what was on the flash drive. I called the office and took the afternoon off, then drove home. Once I got there, I went straight to my personal computer and plugged in the flash drive. There were several videos on it, all showing Sarah engaging in explicit acts with different men, including Jeff Williams. Some of the videos even showed Sarah with Jeff and another man. In one particularly gut-wrenching scene, the camera caught Sarah going into the bathroom. She didn't bother closing the door for privacy as she normally would. As I watched, she took off her wedding rings, urinated on them while sitting on the toilet, and then laughed as she tossed them on the sink. "Damn, you're one nasty woman," Jeff said from off-camera. "I hope you wash those things before you put them back on." "Yeah, I will," Sarah replied with a giggle. "Besides, the only time I ever wear them is when that loser's around." "Why don't you just divorce him if you think so little of him?" Jeff asked. She shrugged. "I still like him a little," she said. "Besides, it's more fun doing this behind his back. Maybe one day I'll have you and some other guy come over, and we can make him watch us. Maybe we can set him up like we do some of the other guys we go up against and then destroy him completely." "You want to make him your willing cuck?" Jeff asked, laughing. Sarah smiled. "He won't like it at first," she said. "He'll probably fight it for a while, but once he realizes just how much damage we can do to him and his reputation, he'll give in. You want to help me? If that means I get to have you anytime I want, hell yeah," he said. She giggled like a schoolgirl. "Good," she said. "He's never going to know what hit him." I couldn't believe this was the woman I'd fallen in love with. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just declared war, and I swore to give her a fight she wouldn't forget. I read the PI report, which detailed that Sarah and her lovers often met at a downtown hotel at least once a week and always spent the night at least one weekend a month. The report mentioned that Sarah had spent an entire weekend with Jeff at my house last month, while I was away on reserve drill. Looking at the schedule, I realized that these were the weekends I was out of town. I still had some time before she'd get home, so I called the law offices of Linda Hawkins, the attorney Laura had recommended. The receptionist scheduled me for a meeting with Linda the next morning. After that, I logged into our bank account and took care of the usual steps one does before a divorce. I paid off and canceled our joint credit cards, opened a separate account in my name only, and transferred half of our money into that account. Then I went to my gun safe and pulled out my .45 caliber M1911 pistol. I inserted a fully loaded magazine into the grip and attached the pistol to my belt. The state we live in requires a permit to carry a firearm, and I made sure my permit was current. I also had a concealed carry permit, but I rarely took advantage of it. After hearing Sarah and her lover's plans, I didn't want to take any unnecessary chances. I went into what used to be our bedroom, grabbed a suitcase and an overnight bag, and packed some of her clothes and toiletries. I didn't care how I packed them. I just wanted her stuff out of my sight. I set the luggage next to the door and sat at my computer, waiting for her to come home. When Sarah finally walked in, she seemed shocked to see me. "Jake, what are you doing home so early?" she asked, walking into the bedroom that doubled as my office. "I had some things to take care of," I said nonchalantly. Then she noticed the pistol on my hip. "Why are you wearing that?" she asked, looking worried. "Self-protection," I replied. "By the way, I have something to show you." "Oh?" she asked. "What is it? Come on in. You'll find this very interesting," I said, gesturing for her to come closer. She stood beside me, looking at the computer screen. I pulled up one of the videos and hit play. Her eyes widened as she watched herself being drilled by two men. "Well," she finally said, "I guess you caught me." "I reckon so," I said, surprised by her lack of remorse. I'd hoped she would at least apologize or shed a tear, but she didn't. Instead, she seemed even more arrogant than usual. "I suppose now that you know, there's no need for me to sneak around anymore," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "So I'll be bringing Jeff by the house from time to time. And yes, he'll be spending the night in my bed. And yes, you'll watch. And if you're a good boy, I might let you have the leftovers." "Too bad, really. I had hoped we could have kept this from you a bit longer. But I see no need to wait." "You're a sick and twisted woman," I said, my voice cold and hard. I'd never spoken to her like this before, and she was clearly shocked. "In fact, you'll get your stuff and get the hell out. Now." "What are you going to do, file for divorce?" she asked, smirking. "Because if you do, it'll be the biggest mistake of your life." "Really?" I asked, my tone challenging. "And why's that? You and your sleazy friends going to make up stories about me like you've done to others?" "You have no idea what we're capable of," she said, her voice dripping with menace. "By the time we're finished with you, you might end up in jail as a wife-beater, and your career in the reserves will be over. We could even plant some illegal stuff on your computer and make it look like you were involved. You'd be amazed at what we can do with video editing software." I stared at her, my anger rising. "So that's your plan? Force me to be your cuck by threatening me with lies and made-up charges?" "Why not?" she asked, shrugging. "We do it all the time. I'll leave for now, but you think about it. I'll give you 48 hours to reconsider. Either go along with the program or get publicly ruined." "Wait," I said, reaching for her hand. She looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "What?" she asked. I ripped her rings off her finger and grabbed her keys out of her purse. "What are you doing?" she demanded as I removed the house key from the key ring. I tossed her purse back at her. "Get out," I said firmly. "I've already packed some of your things. Now go." She looked at the luggage by the door, then back at me, her expression a mix of shock and disbelief. "Come on, Jake. Don't do this," she pleaded, her arrogance faltering. "Out," I repeated, my voice leaving no room for argument. She picked up the luggage and walked out, still in disbelief. As soon as she left, I stopped the recording on my phone and reviewed it to ensure I captured the entire confrontation. Satisfied with the result, I sent the video to my email so I'd have it on my computer. From there, I forwarded it to her parents, her sister, and my parents. I wanted them all to see what Sarah had turned into, and I didn't want her twisting the story to make me the bad guy. I spent the rest of the night drinking beer and watching TV, trying to process everything. After a mostly sleepless night, I called into work and took a couple of vacation days. I explained the situation to my boss, who was understanding. "Just take care of what you need to, and come back when you're ready," he said. "Thanks, boss," I said, ending the call. After taking a shower, I dressed and headed out to meet with Linda Hawkins, the attorney Laura had recommended. I made sure I had all the evidence with me. Linda impressed me with her no-nonsense attitude. She reviewed everything I had and shook her head in disbelief. "Jake, this is unbelievable," she said. "I've heard rumors about Campbell Partners for years, but I never had anything to back it up. We're looking at serious criminal charges here if what Sarah said in those videos is true. So, can we do anything with this? I asked. Absolutely, she said, her eyes sharp with determination. I'll file for divorce on the grounds of adultery and push for a 7,030 split of assets with no spousal support. We'll demand that she provides a full financial disclosure, and I'll work on getting a subpoena for her banking records. If she tries to hide the account, we could bring perjury charges against her. And the rest? I asked. I'll reach out to the state bar and the district attorney's office, she said. This looks like extortion, and we'll see what comes out of that. In the meantime, keep your distance from Sarah. Don't confront her, don't speak to her, and stay away from her workplace. Got it? I nodded. Got it. Good, she said, standing up. I'll get the paperwork started and have her served in the next day or two at her work. Call me on my personal cell if you need anything, but don't abuse the privilege. Thanks, Linda, I said, shaking her hand. Later that day, I got 3 phone calls. The first was from my mother. Jake, I'm so sorry about all this. Are you okay? She asked. I will be, Mom. Thanks, I said. I saw an attorney today and she's taking care of everything. Well, you let us know if you need anything, she said. We love you, Jake. I love you too, Mom, I replied. The next call came from Sarah's parents, who seemed to have trouble grasping the situation. Jake, what the hell is going on? Her father demanded. What did you do? What did I do? I asked incredulously. Besides love Sarah with all my heart, nothing. Did you even watch the video? Did you hear what she said? Yeah, I heard it, but I can't believe she'd do something like that without provocation, he said. Can't you just work through this? No, I can't, I said firmly. I've already seen an attorney and filed for divorce. I'm sorry, son, he finally said, his voice heavy with resignation. This just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me either, I admitted, feeling the weight of everything. But it's the truth. Please don't hurt my little girl, he said, his voice pleading. I won't, I said, ending the call. Her sister also called, and she was furious. What the hell is going on, Jake? What did you do? She demanded. I didn't do a damn thing, I shot back, my patience wearing thin. It's your sister who's gone off the deep end, not me. I don't believe it, she said angrily. My sister would never do something like this. Believe what you want, I said coldly. I don't care. I'm just letting you know why I'm divorcing her. You can take it up with her. I ended the call, fuming. I fired up my computer and checked my email. In my inbox was a message with the subject line, I know what you've done. The sender's address looked suspiciously like it came from Sarah's firm. The email was a typical blackmail attempt, claiming they had videos of me doing something illegal and demanding $100,000 to keep it quiet. I called Bill Myers, the IT security guy at my company, and asked him for a favor. Sure, Jake. What's up? He asked. Well, it's pretty sensitive. Can you keep this quiet? I asked. For you, absolutely, he said. I just got an email that looks like it came from Sarah's law firm, but I can't be sure. Can you take a look at it and let me know what you think? I asked. Sure, send it over. I'll take a look and let you know in a few minutes, he said. Thanks, Bill, I said, ending the call. I forwarded the email to Bill and waited. About 30 minutes later, he called back. What did you find? I asked. Well, it definitely came from Campbell Partners Network, he said. They didn't even bother to mask it or run it through any proxies. Talk about arrogant. And yeah, I can tell you who wrote it. Would you testify to that in court? I asked. Sure, if it comes to that, he said. Thanks, Bill. I owe you big time. I'll let my attorney know. She might want to talk to you, I said. No problem, he replied. Give her my number. We ended the call, and I immediately contacted Linda. She answered on the second ring. Linda Hawkins, she said. Linda, this is Jake Matthews. I just got an email that looks like blackmail. My IT guy says it came from Campbell Partners Network. Really? She asked, her tone serious. Okay, I'm working on your petition now and getting the restraining order. Send that email to me, along with your IT guy's contact info. We'll take care of this. Don't respond or do anything else. Thanks, I said, ending the call. I forwarded the email to Linda and Bill's contact information. Then I popped open another beer, wondering what the hell would happen next. I found out later that evening. Around 9:30 p.m., I got a call from Laura. Jake, are you watching the news? She asked, her voice tense. No, why? I asked, suddenly alert. Turn on Channel 9 right now, she said. Channel 9 was a local news station that I rarely watched, but I switched over. The news anchor was reporting on a mass shooting at a local bar. Breaking news. 4 people were killed and 4 others seriously injured this evening when a gunman opened fire at the Whiskey Barrel Bar and Grill. The shooter, identified as Roger Stevens, was killed at the scene by another patron who was carrying a concealed weapon. Witnesses say the gunman targeted a group of people, yelling that they had ruined his life with their lies before opening fire. All of the victims are reported to be employees of the law firm Campbell Partners. My heart sank as I watched the report. Damn, I muttered into the phone. Laura's voice trembled. Jake, Jeff was one of the people shot. He's dead. I'm sorry, Laura, I said, feeling a mix of emotions. Sarah was there too. I need to find out if she was hurt. Please stay in touch and let me know what's going on, Laura said, her voice breaking. I will, I promised, ending the call. There was a knock on my door, and I opened it to find 2 police officers. Mr. Matthews? One of them asked. Yes, I replied, my stomach tightening. Do you know a Sarah Matthews? The officer asked. I do, I said. She's my wife, at least for now. I'm sorry to inform you, sir, but your wife was seriously injured in the shooting at the Whiskey Barrel. She's been taken to Mercy Hospital, the officer said. How bad is she? I asked, struggling to process the news. I really don't know, sir, the officer replied. I suggest you talk to the doctors when you get there. Again, I'm sorry, sir. They tipped their hats and left. I stood there, feeling a mix of shock and confusion. I wanted Sarah out of my life, but I didn't want her dead. I called Laura back. Laura, this is Jake, I said. Sarah was shot too. I'm heading to the hospital now to find out more. Okay, she said, her voice shaky. Please keep me updated. I will, I assured her, ending the call. I drove to the hospital, where the place was swarming with police, reporters, and medical staff. After some effort, I found someone who could give me an update. Sarah was still in surgery, and they told me I could wait in the waiting room. I filled out the necessary paperwork since she was still on my insurance and settled in to wait. So here I am, back to where my story began, sitting in this hospital waiting room, wondering if I should just walk away or stay. I called Linda to let her know what had happened. She said she'd wait to serve Sarah with the divorce papers until she was out of surgery and stable. I called Sarah's parents and sister to inform them, and naturally they tried to blame me. I shut that down quickly and told them that if I had been involved, I'd probably be dead too, not sitting here at the hospital. They eventually arrived and sat across from me in the waiting room, glaring at me like I was a pile of garbage. I'd already been to the cafeteria, wolfed down some food, and drank several cups of bitter coffee. I'd been sitting there for hours, dozing off more than once, while the news played in the background. It was around 5:00 a.m. when a tired-looking doctor finally approached me. Mr. Matthews? He asked. I looked up at him with tired, bloodshot eyes. Yes, I said, rubbing my eyes to stay awake. Sarah's parents and sister came over to join us. Your wife is in critical condition right now, but she's stable, the doctor said. We removed 3 bullets from her chest, and another bullet grazed her face and damaged her right eye. 1 lung was punctured, and another bullet hit her spinal column. We're confident she'll survive, but the next 24 hours are critical. Is she awake? Her father asked, his voice shaky. The doctor shook his head. No, she's still under anesthesia. Just so you know, it's possible she may never walk again and may not fully recover her sight in her right eye without additional surgery. I'm sorry, he added before walking away. Her father turned to me. So, are you still going to divorce her? He asked, his tone a mix of disbelief and hope. I thought for a moment before answering. A part of me wanted to forgive her, but the betrayal was still too raw. Yes, I said finally. They all looked at me in shock. But I'll wait until she's in stable condition. How could you be so cruel? Her mother asked, her eyes filled with tears. How could she be so cruel? I shot back. Where will she stay? What will she do? Her mother continued, her voice pleading. If I had to guess, that won't be much of an issue, I said, my tone bitter. What do you mean? Her father asked, confused. I didn't want to speak out of turn, nor did I want to give too much away. We'll see, I said, not willing to elaborate. I'm going home, but I'll be back. I left them standing there and drove home, where I showered and collapsed into bed, exhausted. By the next day, news of the shooting had spread across the country. Hundreds of men came forward with similar stories, claiming they had been targeted for extortion by Campbell Partners. for things they never did. The scandal was massive, and state authorities stepped in, arresting numerous lawyers from the firm. The company was forced to shut down, and a massive class action lawsuit was filed against them, seeking millions in damages on top of the criminal charges. 3 days after the shooting, I got a call from the hospital saying that Sarah was awake and asking for me. I called Linda to inform her, and she told me to meet a process server at the hospital. She also mentioned that a detective would be there. I met the process server and Detective Murphy outside Sarah's room. We entered together, where Sarah was sitting up in bed, looking weak and frightened. Her mother was sitting in a chair by the wall. The process server stepped forward. "Sarah Matthews?" he asked. She nodded, and he verified her identity before handing her a manila folder. "You've been served," he said, then left the room. Detective Murphy stood at the foot of her bed, looking down at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You do know that extortion and conspiracy to commit extortion are felonies in this state, right?" he asked. Sarah nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes. And you also know that each act of extortion carries a penalty of up to 15 years in prison, and a 10,000 fine, right?" he asked again. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. He handed her a printed copy of the email I had received. "Does this look familiar?" he asked. She looked at it, defeated. "It should," he continued. "It was composed and sent from your computer under your Logon name, along with about 75 others. We found them all in your sent items folder. My math tells me that 76 counts at 15 years each adds up to 1,140 years, and you're looking at around 760,000 in fines. In short, you're in deep trouble. You know I'm going to have to arrest you, right? The DA is pushing for a life sentence. But if you cooperate, I might be able to get him to cut you a deal. What do you say?" Sarah nodded, her voice trembling. "Okay. All right," Detective Murphy said. "I'll leave you alone with your husband and family for a few minutes, but I'll be back." He looked at me, placed a hand on my shoulder, and walked out. I turned to Sarah, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "I did nothing but love and respect you. What happened?" "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. Her mother grabbed the email and read it, her eyes widening in shock. "My God," she whispered, looking at her daughter. "You actually wrote this to your own husband?" Sarah cried even harder, her shoulders shaking. "How could you?" her mother repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. I looked at Sarah's mother, then back at Sarah. "How do you think Campbell Partners became so successful?" I asked rhetorically. "They did this to a whole bunch of guys, looking to make a quick buck. That's why that guy went and shot them all, and I've got Sarah on video admitting that they did this all the time. No wonder you want to divorce her," she said, looking at me. "I don't blame you one bit." "That, on top of her cheating," I said, my voice cold. "There's no way I want her back ever." Sarah looked up at me, her eyes filled with desperation. "Can you forgive me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I shook my head. "No," I said firmly, "never. I'm just glad we didn't have any kids. And by the way, when you fill out that financial statement, don't forget to include that secret account you set up. You know, the one you hid from me. I'd hate to see you add perjury to your list of crimes." She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock. "You know about that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Of course," I said. "Who do you think did the year-end books and audit for your firm? You think you've got problems now? That's nothing compared to what we found over the last year. Believe me, the feds are going to have a field day with your senior partners." I looked at Sarah one last time. "Goodbye, Sarah," I said. "I loved you once, but not anymore." I walked out as Detective Murphy and 2 uniformed officers entered the room. They handcuffed Sarah to the bed as her mother watched in tears. Campbell Partners was slammed with multiple charges from both state and federal agencies. The class action lawsuit for defamation and other civil torts now involved over 700 men, some of whom had been incarcerated and labeled sex offenders based on the firm's false charges. The firm and its senior partners were eventually ordered to pay over $2.5 billion in fines, fees, and restitution, with the majority going to the victims and their attorneys. All the attorneys involved were disbarred, their licenses to practice law revoked for life. Jenny pleaded guilty and turned state's evidence. The judge sentenced her to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10. By the time she was released, she was a shell of her former self, scarred, blind in one eye, and unable to walk due to the shooting. She lived with her parents, collecting welfare when her savings ran out. The last I heard, she was writing a blog about the dangers of infidelity, of all things. Sarah's betrayal hit me hard. For a long time, I became a recluse, only going on occasional dates. I had serious trust issues with women. But 3 years after the divorce, I met Carol, a former Marine who had also worked as a dispersing clerk. She was about 2 years younger than me, and had recently lost her husband to a sudden heart attack. We dated several times before I felt comfortable enough to tell her about my previous marriage. Carol listened quietly as I explained everything. When I finished, she nodded. "That explains a lot," she said. "I know it was hard for you to tell me all that, but I'm glad you did. You know, not all women are like Sarah. Like you, I believe in the Marine Corps motto, Semper Fidelis. If you give me a chance, I'll prove it to you." And she did multiple times in multiple ways, and she's still proving it after all these years. I eventually retired from the reserves as a master sergeant and started collecting my pension when I turned 55. Carol and I plan to spend our retirement traveling across the country in a new RV we bought with some of the money I received from the class action settlement against the firm. Carol says she intends to love me to death, and I believe her. I can live with that. Thanks for sticking with us through this intense story of betrayal and justice. What would you have done in Jake's situation? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next video.